So, Kamrul, your journey at Ericsson spans diverse roles. You've done operational development in Bangladesh, started there, to leading privacy programs in Stockholm, including compliance, sales operations, or even setting up a local company. Now, looking back at your career, and this could be great advice for people who are youngsters who are planning to start in this area. How do you see your career? GDPR setting a high bar. What are some of the biggest challenges organizations face when trying to maintain transparency through OKRs while ensuring privacy compliance?
You are right. GDPR is one of the stringent laws in these areas, which is very precise, strict, and also very demanding.
What cultural considerations should multinational companies be aware of when rolling out transparent OKR systems in the EU, European Union?
Yes, I can actually see myself there. Multinational mean they are operating in multicultural, multi-nations, multi-jurisdictions. Therefore, I think they are accommodating a lot of things and shaping its own culture, where everyone can actually feel a bit safe.
Folks, welcome to today's episode. We are diving into a really interesting challenge many organizations face right now, balancing radical transparency with the hard realities of privacy regulations. All of you know OKRs. OKRs are objectives and key results. They are amazing for creating alignment, accountability, and openness across teams. But here is the twist. In Europe, where privacy laws like GDPR are strict, that same transparency can actually raise some serious red flags. So how do you walk that fine line between open and protecting sensitive data, right? How do you make sure your OKRs don't end up creating compliance risks or ethical dilemmas? To help us unpack all this, I'm excited to welcome Kamrul Hasan. Kamrul is a privacy pro, a certified information privacy manager with nearly 2 decades of experience leading privacy and compliance programs in complex global environments. He's also a certified OKR practitioner, so he really understands what it takes to marry transparency with regulatory responsibility. Today, Kamrul is here to share insights, real-world ideas, and practical frameworks to help organizations implement OKRs thoughtfully, especially when privacy laws come into play. Kamrul, thank you so much for being here. Welcome again.
Thank you, Santil. I'm glad to be here.
Great. That's great. So, Kamrul, let's probably start with exploring your journey in privacy and governance, right? Maybe a short introduction to your career. You've built a pretty remarkable career in privacy and compliance across verticals like telecom and IT. What initially drew you into this space?
Yes. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not that young anymore, meaning that I have worked for a while now. And one thing I can tell you, in last almost 2 decades, 20 years, I have always wear one single hat. That is a compliance hat. And compliance, as you know, is a broader. For example, it started with ISO certification, which is the basic on the standardization. Then started with, if you this group management control, internal controls, then Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX, then different financial reporting standards, all of these. And finally, landed with anti-bribery corruption, compliance itself more broader from legal entity perspective, and then full time in privacy. When I started in privacy, I'm not a legal professional. I consider myself more a generalist, meaning that I know pieces and pieces almost from many parts of the organization. What interesting is when I started this privacy, in my interview with legal counsel once, I just said that I am a generalist, but I can be the missing piece of this puzzle, meaning that privacy is not only and always about the regulation, regulatory authorities and laws. In some way, we need to translate that into the organization so that people can understand and integrate with their daily ways of. So that was, I would say, the missing puzzle. I came here on board in privacy, but this is a fast area and heavy area. Therefore, need to learn on the go. More I learn, more I feel comfortable in these areas. And also, my key here is to operationalize privacy, especially for big multinational organization with multiple jurisdiction. That is a huge, I would say, heavy lifting. There I see my values and my interest, what keeps me motivated every day to work in these areas.
Great. That's fantastic. So, Kamrul, your journey at Ericsson spans diverse roles. You have done operational development in Bangladesh, started there, to leading privacy programs in Stockholm, including compliance, sales operations, or even setting up a local company. Now, looking back at your career, and this could be great advice for people who are youngsters who are planning to start in this area, how do you see your career? Right? Was there any specific defining moment or great experience early in your career which really shaped your leadership style and approach to handling complex privacy and compliance challenges? Right. So, and how have you been adapting across these varied responsibilities, and how has that really helped your career in managing privacy programs? Maybe so a little bit on your personal career.
Thank you. Right after my second MBA in financial management from Germany, I decided to go back to my home country. And after a brief period, I started with this company. And operational development, it talks about the process efficiency, management system, multi-level of compliance certification. So did that, learned that within the country atmosphere and within the regional atmosphere, that is Southeast Asian countries. That was really fun, interesting. Every day we are living because, if you love your work, you will enjoy every moment. So that was the situation for almost 5 years within Southeast Asia. Then I moved to Middle East, which is also by chance, meaning that I was interested in the process, and particularly at one point I concentrated on the sales process, because for a big organization to run it successfully in 100 plus jurisdiction, definitely a structured sales management system process to be established. Since I was interested on that, I got an opportunity in Middle East region, which consists of about 20 plus countries, working with the sales person in commercial management, supporting them on the sales process, sales reporting, sales systems. Salespeople are very smart people, no doubt on that. But when it comes to following the procedure, the organizational requirement documentation, maybe they have some scope to work on that. Therefore, I was really behind those smart people working on these areas, was keeping me every day. Then I moved in company's headquarters in Stockholm. It was an assignment for a specific, as you mentioned, I established or helped establishing a local entity. Yes, it's not just creating an entity. Creation of the entity, legal procedure, all the legal procedures should be followed, including all the licensing. Then go for operational, because it should be operational with people, with everything. Then the complex IT infrastructure. These three together to establish a big entity. I did for my home country. I did support in Vietnam, Cambodia, all these things. So my assignment here was to create a global blueprint for such work, so that every time we do similar work, it's not starting from scratch. Then, fortunately, I got a permanent offer in the head office, headquarters, to run some financial compliance or regulatory reporting, like IFRS 15, which talk about revenue recognition, and IFRS 16, IFRS 9, all these things. So, in short, this is my 8th job role within the organization. It's diverse, but one thing is constant. One is compliance, and second is project management, or particularly execution. And being a generalist, that's why maybe I fit in many areas as it comes. And compliance, so far my favorite, one of favorite, and it is actually a vast area too.
That's really a stellar career path, right? So congratulations again, Kamrul. Now, let's shift our focus now to privacy principles and OKR systems, which is really the core of the podcast today. Now, transparency is a core principle of OKRs, right? But GDPR champions data minimization and purpose limitation. So how can these two coexist in practice?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I'm not a legal profession, but I talked with a lawyer just to get the idea, because that person is quite familiar about OKR, because we work together. Also an expert in privacy, meaning that privacy legal counsel. I was talking with her in a friendly way that is there an issue between GDPR or other privacy regulations and the OKR? Then I think she agreed on my view that both things actually is not contradicting. But in principle, we can say OKR is a more structured way to manage organizational units or individual performance. So one side, this is more performance management too. And within this performance management, we particularly talked about that personal information that the privacy regulations are concerned, transparency, then transfer, then limitation. Actually, minimum information about person is needed in OKR ways of. Because with my experience, I have also seen barely minimum information. Who is the driver? Who is the champion? That is the basic information we need. So it is not, I would say, violating directly with GDPR unless in the performance management they do some kind of sensitive, let's say, profiling, decision making, or even storing some information may not be needed. So in short, I personally, in my experience, it's not a legal opinion, although in my experience, these two can coexist easily and it is not contradictory. Rather, can actually complement. And why I say complement is that, let's say, regulatory, that framework or the law is coming towards the organization to comply. The organization must set its objective towards that compliance. Also depending on the maturity, depending on the priority, depends on the resources. And OKR ways of working rather helping organization complying with the privacy, although some other areas too. I would say it can complement rather than compete or contradict.
That's a brilliant response. In fact, what I've seen, some people having concern, and that's definitely a minority of the people, right? Because they, as you rightly said, we're not really storing or exposing any private information here, right? So we're not, sharing somebody's, let's say, salary or performance review or the contact number. We're not sharing any private details. Some people are, their worry is that, hey, if I am assigning a specific key result to somebody with some specific targets and achievement, and if that's going to be exposed to their peers, is there a privacy violation, right? So that's what some people seem to be worried about. But I think you've pretty clearly explained that's not the case, and that's your opinion. So thank you very much for sharing that. Now, moving on, let's zoom into Europe's privacy landscape. With GDPR setting a high bar, what are some of the biggest challenges organizations face when trying to maintain transparency through OKRs while ensuring privacy compliance?
You are right. GDPR is one of the stringent laws in these areas, which is very precise, strict, and also very demanding for organization. That is one part. But another good part is that if someone can be comfortably saying that, yes, we are following GDPR, meaning that they will be covered most of the jurisdiction in the world, which is also good. Minor deviation, but most of them are also taking GDPR as their baseline standard, which is good. But from GDPR perspective, particularly, their principle, I particularly don't see that it is violating or any way contradicting, as I mentioned earlier. Purpose limitation. Definitely, we need to justify in normal ways that why we are collecting this data. Is that necessary? Then also to whom it is shared. Yes, it is not shared to the whole world because this organizational performance target itself might be in a information class not open for all because it may be commercially sensitive, confidential. So in any case, this is not a free-flowing data. And just to make your earlier point, you are saying, yes, there is a risk that this performance evaluation can actually, people are scared because are we profiling? Are we doing the surveillance on them? But that is also organization's culture. A person's performance is not just to highlight that this is the bad performer in the organization. This is between employer-employee relationship, employee-manager relationship. Rather than highlighting as a failure, find the root cause, why this person is not delivering on key result. And then if a smart organization, smart managers, they will help the person to overcome that. So there is a risk of certain things, but those are minimum. Rather, it also depends on organizational culture. So in principle, I don't see particular OKR ways of working will be directly conflicting with GDPR's principle of all this purpose limitation, Then, as you say, data minimization, or even GDPR provide some really good thing like the rights, data subject rights. I have the rights to ask the organization, what kind of data you have about me? Can you share? I have the right to do that without any cost, let's say. Meaning that it's also balanced. I can ask for the deletion. I can ask for the retention. How long will you? In practice, a lot of things happening. Let's say when young people are starting their career, they are applying for a job. You may be afraid that yes, once they apply it, and if rejected in some way, maybe their data is stored, it will be taken again and again, the same rejection with the same person. Maybe this person has grown and maybe perfect for the role. But yes, I have the deletion option to ask. GDPR is providing this. GDPR basic is just protect the human rights because privacy is considered as a human rights in this context. So it's a both way.
Yeah, brilliant points. I think I really like the fact that you said that the focus is really on business performance. A couple of points that really stood out, I would say, where when you said that, the focus is really on business performance, not really employee performance. And also, data is not available universally. It is really available under some very specific circumstances within the organization. It's not being propagated. And also, you mentioned very clearly that, good organizations, progressive organizations will really look at, even if a specific key result is tied to an individual, they're going to really look at the root cause for not achieving that key result, right? So it could be multiple things. It could be, completely outside the employee's perspective, right? Could be something changes in the environment, technology, resources. It could be the employee's skill level, right, which may need some updating, or some specific circumstances where the employee may need additional support. So you are absolutely right. A manager can really make it use of this in a very positive way, right? Rather than trying to penalize or, specific employee's performance, right? So that was a brilliant answer. Now, staying on this topic of GDPR, right, a couple of specific questions, and then we will move on to other topics. So from your experience, displaying the OKRs and the progress metrics across an organization, is that a form of performance surveillance? And what features or approaches should companies look for in OKR platform to strike the right balance?
Yes, I can actually bring in one personal experience here. Let's say one unit developed their own OKR ways of working, decided the OKR, and this OKR must be communicated to other dependent function or stakeholders. So what they did is that they have multiple versions of that OKR. One is with the graphical chart with high level, show the relationship, objective, key results, benefits, so on. No personal information is there. So that audience, they even are not interested that this key result this deliverable is belong to XYZ. They don't have interest or they don't need to know. Then the second level, a bit detailed coming, meaning that one organization, because they do have a dependency. And if there is a dependency, they must know the person's maybe at least name, who will be contacting for what, or to whom we should deliver this. We should ask question. So on that level, need to know basis, because these are the peers who need to work on this. They were shared the name, not necessarily all names. They are sharing the segment related to that. And then within the unit, everybody knows everybody, and then they knows who is doing for what, and they can also build up synergy. So the essence is, I would say, based on the stakeholders' needs, if organization is smartly handling with different cluster of information to be shared, need to know basis, it will actually solve that issues.
Yeah, I think it's a terrific point that you just mentioned, that sharing this information in terms of the progress with peers is really going to help in better execution, right, of business processes, because there may be dependencies across departments, right? So we all know, for example, let's say sales is dependent on marketing, right, generating enough leads. And if, let's say there's a particular person in marketing who's responsible for generating leads, of course, their peers in sales would be very interested to know how that is performed. So, and then we can cite a lot of examples, right? So the focus for transparency here is really to make people collaborate and execute better for the business, right? So it's not really to isolate or identify or performance surveillance at all, right? I think you brought that out pretty brilliantly. Thank you very much. Probably the last question on the GDPR area before we move on to other topics is, in the GDPR context, is the confidence level or progress percentage of an individual's OKR considered sensitive personal data?
Again, I would not think so, although this is not a legal opinion, because as I said, we are using minimum information of the person and necessary information. And also, I would say it's more performance management rather than surveillance or monitoring the person's behavior. As I say, this is employer-employee relationship. Within this relationship, actually, a lot of things need to do. Otherwise, both parties will not survive. If company is disconnected with the employees, it will not make sense in the long run. Both same, of course. I don't see that is a huge risk on that perspective. If I answered your question.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, Kamrul. Now, Kamrul, just staying on the topic a little bit, maybe a couple of questions, right? Just to bring some more clarity. And do you see the risks in OKRs to drive performance when the visibility of underperformance can lead to stigma or bias against individuals? Do you see that as a possibility?
It is a possibility. And also if the people actually see it with or use it with an intention, it is possible, of course. But as said earlier, that the smart people, smart managers, smart organization will actually rather use it as a root cause to resolve the issues, blaming someone and exposing someone or some way. But there is, of course, minor risks, but it also depends on organizational culture.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. It really depends upon the purpose for which the whole program is being deployed, and also the culture, right? Probably the culture of the organization, right? How you are actually executing a program like this, right? And as you rightly pointed out, are you looking at this as a way to uncover the real problems for execution, right? Rather than trying to use this as a performance surveillance, right? So if that's not the case, then there's really nothing to be worried. And a lot of organizations have great culture that provide psychological safety, right, for employees, right, to work with. So, if you have problems with this, probably the problem, you need to look at the root cause somewhere else, right? It's not really with OKRs, right? You need to really look at some deeper self-reflection, right, about where the problem is within the organization. That's a great point.
And
Yeah.
point just mentioned from project management perspective, since I'm also there, there's a few years back, one much bigger survey says that 67% of big global IT project fails to deliver. It is either underperformed, it took more time, cost, resources. 67% failure rate, one way or another.
Wow.
Yes. But if an organization is following a systematic way, a methodology will not guarantee 100% success because all other dependencies are there, but at least it will give a better chance to perform within the cost, quality, time. I think OKR ways of working has the similar concept. It will not ensure that organization is reaching its objective, but it will increase the likelihood of the result. And if there is a delta between the result and ambition, then they can dig down and find the root causes and correct immediately. Because this cycle is not 2-year cycle. This is a frequent cycle, meaning that a bit agile ways of working, I would say. This is from my project management.
I think those are some phenomenal stats that you quoted, and you are absolutely on point in terms of the inference from there and the lessons from there. Right? So really appreciate you sharing those personal insights, Kamrul. Now, one more question specific to OKRs here, in terms of the approach, is that some clients have said that, hey, we want the OKRs to be visible, which means, they want the, target value to be visible. They want the exact OKR, what exactly needs to be achieved to be visible, but they don't want to expose the achievement levels, right? So out of the target, how much has been achieved? Do you see this as a balanced approach, or do you see this as problematic with, the overall objectives of OKR itself, right? The whole idea of OKRs.
It could be some reasonable reasons some people are concerned if they are more sensitive on the information confidentiality perspective, because some competitive information might be very sensitive. Therefore, they don't want to put it in different way. However, in general, I don't see that this could be a big issue. There might be some exception, but in general, most part of the organization, it should not be an issue.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. For European leaders eager to embrace radical transparency, but let's say they're feeling cautious because of privacy risks, what practical advice would you share? How can those leaders design great OKR practices or tools to help them walk that fine line confidently, the line between radical transparency and privacy risks, right? What is your advice?
Maybe I will be a bit biased because I am pro OKR now, because I found really it's a great way of doing or achieving, and also put a likelihood of achieving this thing and bring it more transparent. That is, I am a bit pro. But from in broader GDPR perspective, I personally, again repeating, I personally don't see that GDPR maybe used in a misuses a bit. Because sometimes I have seen that when GDPR first came, a lot of people are very much concerned taking photos, sharing name, all this thing, and they're giving GDPR the blame. Maybe they were overreacting on that GDPR. Still, we need to see the principle protecting human rights, privacy as a human right, GDPR definite purpose, putting some formalities, some requirements, because this is a data-driven world and data is transferring here and there everywhere. And there are good intention with good work, but there are also bad intention to protect people from bad intention. And in companies' internal point of view, they must not have their bad intention with the OKR, because their objective should not be not permissible by the law itself, not only GDPR privacy law, all other law. Their objective should not be conflicting with the law. They are not setting those. Therefore, I don't see a direct face-to-face statics here. I think leaders should feel more comfortable to put even OKR within the area they haven't thought earlier that OKR is possible, because it's a simple performance measurement management tool or system, ways of working, methods.
Yeah, that's absolutely on the point. Very impressive answer. Thank you very much, Kamru. Pivoting to the next point, which is role-based access and purpose limitation. Maybe a few questions there. Number one, how can companies design role-based visibility into OKRs without violating principles of necessity or data economy? Do you have any thoughts there?
Most of the tool by default, I think you are pretty familiar, and a lot of us a bit on this privacy by design. So a lot of tools by default has kind of an access control access models, role-based access, also, or maybe more restrictive access, or restrictive access, a more restrictive procedure, or create a separate tenant or separate environment so that it is different than the main one. So all these facilities are there, and yes, they can just choose any. Some other also techniques are used if you are particularly concerned on those personal information. There are techniques, anonymization, or put it in an extra security layer, extra access layer, protect it in some way, view only, not shareable, not transferable, not. So this kind of all the rules are available based on the need. You can do it. It is well practiced, as you know.
That's a splendid answer. Thank you, Kamrul. Now, on the topic of alignment and individuals' OKRs, a question here. Can an individual's OKRs be aligned or cascaded by others without their explicit consent? And we have seen organizations do both ways. But what are your thoughts there?
Yes, the privacy consent, this is a big area, and also internal consent. Because from broader perspective, definitely employee-employee relationship is a kind of a contractual agreement. Definitely. Within the contractual agreement, there should be some free flow of this consent, like by signing the employment letter, I by default kind of agree on certain stuff already. And I need to provide certain stuff already to the company in order to also for them to meet their legal obligation. So therefore, an explicit or a separate consent for OKR purpose only, that Kamrul, I will put your name as a driver for this care, and this will be shared with other people in the organization who may need to support in this work. I don't think that is a bit overdoing, because by all, it is pretty simple, straight what I am expected to do, what I do for my stakeholders. So this information is already there one way or another.
Yeah, it's quite illuminating, really, the way you put it, that the employee's employment contract, right, actually clearly, is a blanket document that sets the expectations for the rest of the relationship, right? And you don't have to do it at every level, at every step, right? I mean, that's probably going to not require an overkill, as you brilliantly put it, right? So thank you very much.
Also, a lot of organization has their employee privacy notice. This is a quite big document also. In addition to all of these, they use this employee privacy notice. I have seen many companies employee privacy notice. It is quite big. There mentioned that what else is needed, which is safeguarding employer, also employee, because by seeing that, I'm agreeing.
Okay, that's great. Now, turning our attention to the communication aspect, right, from a compliance standpoint, how important do you think it is to document and communicate the purpose of OKRs internally from a compliance standpoint?
Yes, definitely we need some friend to drive this thing. And to make this friendship, definitely we need to inform them. So I can give one example particularly. Before even starting this, we had a kind of a gathering, then showing that this is our plan, why we are doing this, how it should be done, what will be the possible impact. Also having a dialogue that this is not the parachute drop or drop down. Once we have taken the bottom-up approach, that Kamrul, you have certain things, certain plan. Can I start capturing these? Then go to the second level relation with a bit bigger objective, and then the organizational aspiration. So this way, basically, what I am saying that a smooth communication, more cooperation and collaboration, facilitation. Somebody need to drive that facilitation. And in this way, I think when we get some friends, these are much more easier. Instead of see a burden, everyone will see more engaged to that. And when they are engaged, by naturally motivated and will perform better even. So starting point, get some buy-in, define the objective, purpose, and make some allies.
I think that was a superb personal anecdote. Thanks for that, Kamru. Now, this leads us naturally to some lessons from Europe and enterprise use cases. Maybe a couple of questions there. What cultural considerations should multinational companies be aware of when rolling out transparent OKR systems in the EU, European Union?
Yes, I can actually see myself there. Multinational mean they are operating in multicultural, multi-nations, multi-jurisdictions, meaning that they must have people from multicultural, diverse background. That also see that they will also contribute their own culture to this multiculture, meaning that ultimately a multinational, one way or another, is kind of adopting multicultural. Therefore, I think they are accommodating a lot of things and shaping its own culture, where everyone can actually feel a bit safe. Europe, yes, you see Europe from America, but we see Europe, 27 countries. You see the language difference, you see the people difference, meaning that there also some historical difference of there. So your bird eye view, and here we also see the difference. So within Europe, I would say big organization, they are multinational and multicultural, and over there, over the period, they also influenced by different cultures and define their own culture, and that is actually accommodating all. It's not a challenge rather than a more opportunity, like in America or other countries.
Yeah, I think referring to the 27 countries and the multicultural aspects of EU, I think that was a pretty superb way of putting it, right? And I really liked it. Now, building on that, let's explore probably the last topic of discussion, which is the future of privacy-conscious performance systems, right? So do you believe OKRs and privacy can truly coexist at scale, right, in the regulated industries like telecom or healthcare? What are your thoughts?
Yes, in privacy regulatory landscape, as I said, out of 194 UN, it is last year's statistic, 137 jurisdictions adopted privacy law one way or another. It's not actually ending here. So the vast, just tracking the regulatory progress, and it is so fast changing, itself is a challenge. An organizational must set its ambition level. And when it comes to ambition level objective towards this compliance of, let's say, privacy regulation, they must set certain point that how we can reach our objective. Because maybe one organizational, they don't have the capacity to comply 137 regulation at once tomorrow. But they should set their objective and then proceed through that. It is rather helping in this compliance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was an outstanding response. Thank you. Now, for a tool like Profit.co, which you have started using now, what sort of privacy safeguards would you like to see in OKR software platforms? Any thoughts?
Yes, I'm user of Profit.co and I'm happy on that. And I think you have thought even before designing the system about minimization, because you need minimum personal information in that tool, barely minimum. So I think you are safe on that, and you do have access controls in quite a good way. And also some more facilities might be, because the differentiation I can see, the unit level, organizational, multi-level, that can also help and protect the privacy concern in the tool. So I think tool is good enough here, and certain reporting aspect, you, let's say, so-called, don't take it, it's just a noun, just a normal talk, GDPR compliant OKR report, meaning that no personal information in that report, meaning that which can be freely shared. You do have certain report, but this kind of reporting aspects based on the stakeholders group or their access model, you have certain. I think in future you can also look more on those. That here you have control over the system, over the access, over the visibility, and here also a easy output for the stakeholders as per their need to know information.
Sure. I think that's absolutely on point and very illuminating. Probably the final question for this podcast. Kamrul, with you have pretty vast experience across multiple geographies, across multiple industries, and you've spent a lot of time in Europe. Now, if you were advising a company launching OKRs in Europe for the first time, what are your top 3 must-dos from a privacy perspective?
Start with bare minimum, just bare minimum. Forget about drivers, forget about champions, rather start with the objective, the right level of OKR, break down by department, still without much personal information. But at one point, when we go further down in this vertical structure, there we will find tiny subunits. There maybe we can put it, some of the people need to drive, meaning that bare minimum privacy information, personal information there, and also start with an easy thing and start thinking about breakdown in a right way, because sometimes this is really difficult. And also, I personally, I have seen one issues with quantifying a lawyer's output. How you quantify? This task may need 1 hour or 5 hours. It is a bit subjective. Therefore, those OKR with some measurable delivery, at least with some of the new areas which OKR was not used earlier, it's better to make it as simple, as visible as possible. So these are, I would say, 2, and also be adaptable. Yes, OKR is a fantastic method, but maybe you can do bit customization based on the need.
Yeah, I think those are some really brilliant ideas, and I really liked the way you put it, right? Which is, start from a top-down perspective, cascade it down, and start with a minimalist perspective, and then as you cascade it down, eventually at the last mile, yes, you need to define accountability. You might have to attach names, right, to specific key results to drive accountability, and I think that's a pretty brilliant way of putting it. So that brings us to the close of this session. And Kamrul, I would say this has been a pretty enlightening session, right? And I really like the fact that you brought out a lot of your personal experiences, anecdotes on this, what could be a rather complex topic of, OKRs and privacy, balancing them in the GDPR context, in Europe, right? This could be a little tough topics for some, but I think you really broke down it to make it very easy to understand, particularly sharing some insights. So we really thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you again, Kamrul.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And it was pleasant talking with you on this. And also, it also brought me a self-reflection that we are doing, but it was really a pleasure to explain what we are doing, how we are doing, and some of my personal thought again. And I'll be happy to get in touch with you in future, of course. And this is a journey, and it should continue. And far we go, far we feel we are mature. So thank you, Senthil, again. I wish you all the best.